They said she had a gift, that Arya Vance could smell emotion itself, fear, love, lies, like others smell roses. But the night Julian betrayed her at New York Fashion Week, standing beside an heiress who wore Arya's stolen perfume, she realized her gift meant nothing. She couldn't smell the betrayal coming. Now she has nothing, no career, no future, no name. But a man in the shadows has been watching, a man who doesn't smell like anything at all. And his offer is as dangerous as it is impossible to refuse. If you're hooked, stay until the end. Hit like and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far Arya's story reaches. Arya Vance stood in the wings of the Bryant Park runway, surrounded by chaos she couldn't hear anymore. Models rushed past in clouds of hairspray and silk. Assistants shouted into headsets. Photographers jostled for position beyond the curtain, their cameras already flashing like mechanical heartbeats. It should have been the pinnacle of her career, her fragrance, Reverie, debuting at New York Fashion Week as the signature scent of the Castellane collection. 7 years of work. 7 years of waking at dawn to distill jasmine in her cramped Brooklyn studio, of bleeding herself dry to create something no one had smelled before. But all Arya could smell was the lie. It clung to the air like smoke, acrid and wrong. She'd caught it 2 days ago and ignored it, told herself she was paranoid, that Julian couldn't do this to her. Not after 3 years together. Not after he'd promised her the world while she handed him every formula, every note, every secret she'd guarded since childhood. Arya, you need to see this. Her assistant Mika appeared at her elbow, face pale, phone thrust forward. Arya didn't want to look. She already knew. The scent of betrayal had been growing stronger all week, threading through Julian's cologne, through the heiress's perfume, through everything. On the screen, a press release. Julian Ashford and Celeste Castellane, the 24-year-old fashion empire heiress, stood together in a promotional photo that looked like an engagement announcement. The headline read, Castellane-Ashford Partnership Unveils Revolutionary Fragrance, Reverie. Not Arya Vance Presents. Not created by, just gone, erased. That's your formula, Mika whispered, voice cracking. I know. Arya's voice came out flat, dead. The scent hit her harder now, not just betrayal, triumph. Julian's triumph, smug and golden, mixed with Celeste's satisfaction, all powder and cold champagne. They were out there somewhere, accepting congratulations for Arya's life's work. You have to do something, Mika said. You have to tell someone. Tell them what? Arya's laugh tasted like copper. That I gave my fiancé every note, every formula, because I trusted him. That I never trademarked it because he said love didn't need contracts? She'd been so stupid. So colossally, irreversibly stupid. The show started. Through the gap in the curtain, Arya watched models glide down the runway in Castellane's designs, each one trailing the scent she'd built from nothing. Her mother's gardenia formula as the base, ambergris she'd sourced from a coast in New Zealand, a heart note of black currant that took 2 years to perfect. It smelled like memory and longing and the exact moment before you fall in love. Now it smelled like theft. There she is, Julian's voice. Arya turned slowly. He looked perfect. He always looked perfect. Sandy hair styled just carelessly enough to seem effortless, the slim-cut suit she'd helped him pick out last month, that easy smile that had convinced her he was different from every other man who'd wanted to use her talent for their gain. She'd believed he loved her for more than what she could create. She'd been wrong about that too. Arya. He said her name like they were still engaged, like he hadn't just burned her career to ashes. I was hoping we could talk before... Before what? Before you take your bow for my work? His smile faltered. Behind him, Celeste appeared, tall, reed thin, wearing the kind of bored beauty that came from generations of inherited wealth. She looked at Arya the way people look at furniture they're deciding whether to keep. Miss Vance? Celeste's voice was cool, her French accent polished to a diamond edge. I wanted to thank you for your contribution. Julian spoke very highly of your assistance with the initial concept work. Assistance. Concept work. Arya felt something crack inside her chest. Not her heart. That was already broken. Something deeper. The part of her that still believed the world rewarded talent, that believed in fairness, that believed she mattered. "I created that perfume," Arya said quietly. "Every note, every molecule. That's 7 years of my life you're wearing." Actually, Julian cut in, his tone gentle, patronizing. "If you look at the development timeline, most of the significant breakthroughs happened after you and I began collaborating. You provided some interesting initial ideas, but the final formula, the one being produced, that's a joint effort. I refined it significantly." The lie was so smooth it almost sounded true. Arya stared at him, at this man she'd shared a bed with, planned a future with, and realized she'd never really known him at all. She'd trusted her gift to warn her, but Julian had never smelled like a liar because he'd believed his own story. He'd convinced himself he'd earned this. "You're a talented nose, Arya," Celeste said, checking her phone with the air of someone already bored with the conversation. But talent isn't the same as vision. Julian has vision. He understands the market, the branding, what people actually want. You're an artist. Artists need direction. Mika made a strangled sound of fury. Arya put a hand on her arm. "I could fight this," Arya said. "I have early notes, development journals." "Do you have contracts?" Celeste's smile was razor thin. "Patents? Copyright registrations? Or did you create everything in Julian's apartment, using supplies he purchased, while living rent-free under his generosity?" The air left Arya's lungs. Julian had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Arya, I offered to add your name to the credits. As a consultant, that's more than fair." "Fair?" The word came out raw. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. And there it was, the irritation underneath the charm. He was done pretending. "I gave you opportunities. I introduced you to people. You'd still be working at that sad little flower shop in Brooklyn if it wasn't for me." Arya felt Mika's hand tighten around hers. Around them, stagehands and assistants had stopped pretending not to listen. This was her humiliation, public and complete. "I won't fight you," Arya heard herself say. "You win." Relief flooded Julian's face. Celeste had already turned away, bored. "I knew you'd be reasonable," Julian said. "You're a good person, Arya. That's what I always loved about you." He left. Celeste followed. The show continued. Arya stood in the wings, surrounded by the scent of her stolen work, and felt herself disappear. She went back to Brooklyn. Not to Julian's apartment, she couldn't stomach that, but to the tiny studio above the flower shop where she'd started 8 years ago, fresh from her fragrance training in Grasse. Mrs. Chen, who owned the shop, took one look at Arya's face and asked no questions. Just handed her the key. Arya climbed the narrow stairs to the space she'd rented when she first arrived in New York. One room, a hot plate, a mattress on the floor, and hundreds of small glass bottles lining makeshift shelves. Her laboratory. Her entire world, before Julian convinced her to dream bigger. She sat on the floor and tried to cry. Nothing came. Her phone buzzed. Texts from colleagues who'd seen the show, asking carefully neutral questions. An email from her former mentor in France. What happened? Messages from Julian's friends, people she'd thought were her friends too, already choosing sides, already choosing him. By midnight, the internet had made its decision. Arya Vance, bitter ex-girlfriend trying to claim credit for her successful fiancé's work. The narrative was set. She could scream the truth from every rooftop in New York, and it wouldn't matter. Julian had money. Celeste had power. Arya had nothing but her gift, and that hadn't been enough to save her. She must have fallen asleep on the floor because she woke to weak morning light and the smell of something wrong. Not bad wrong, just present, where there should have been nothing. Arya sat up, her nose already working. The scent was faint, expensive, vetiver and smoke, with something underneath she couldn't place. Dark, controlled. It didn't belong in her studio. "You're awake." Arya scrambled backward, her spine hitting the shelves. Glass bottles rattled. A man sat in the room's only chair, perfectly still, watching her. He hadn't been there when she fell asleep. She was sure of that. "Who the hell?" "My name is Lucien Devereaux." His voice was quiet, accented. French, but not Parisian. Southern, maybe. Older. "I apologize for the intrusion. Your landlord was accommodating." He was perhaps 40, though it was hard to tell. Dark hair threaded with gray. dark eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, sharp features that would have been handsome if they weren't so carefully blank. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than Arya's entire year's rent, and his scent, that was the disturbing part. Arya's gift had been with her since childhood. She smelled everything: emotion, intention, the truth beneath the words. Happy people smelled like honey and grass. Liars smelled like rust. Fear was bitter almonds. Love was roses cut with something mineral and clean. This man smelled like smoke and expensive wool and absolutely nothing else. No fear, no aggression, no emotion at all. It was like looking at a person-shaped hole in the world. "I should scream," Arya said. "You should." He didn't move. "But you won't." He was right. She didn't know why, but she knew he was right. "What do you want?" "I watched what happened to you at Fashion Week," Lucian said. "The theft, the erasure. It was unjust." Arya's laugh was sharp. "Thanks for the sympathy. You can leave now." "I'm not offering sympathy." He leaned forward slightly. In the gray morning light, his eyes looked black. "I'm offering revenge." The word hung in the air between them. "I don't know you," Arya said carefully. "I don't know why you're here or how you found me. Your mother was Isabel Vance. She died in a laboratory fire in Grasse when you were 12. You've spent your entire life trying to recreate the perfume she made, using the gift she passed down to you." Lucien's voice remained flat, but the words landed like stones. "Julian Ashford and Celeste Castellane stole your formula because you trusted them. Now you have nothing. No work, no reputation, no future. You're considering whether it's worth continuing at all." Arya's blood went cold. "How do you—" "I've been watching you for a long time, Miss Vance. That's—" She stopped. The scent, or rather, the lack of it. He meant every word, and she couldn't tell because there was nothing to read. "That's insane. You're insane." "Perhaps." He stood, and Arya realized how tall he was. Tall and thin and utterly still, like a knife. "But I have a proposition. Come to France. Work for me for 1 year. Create one perfume, a specific perfume I require. In exchange, I will restore everything that was taken from you. Your reputation, your career, your name." "Why would I trust you?" "You wouldn't." Something that might have been a smile touched his mouth. "But what choice do you have?" Arya wanted to tell him to leave, to get out of her studio and her life. She wanted to call the police, though she suspected they'd never catch him. This man moved through the world like water, like smoke, like something that didn't follow normal rules. But he was right about one thing: she had nothing left to lose. "What kind of perfume?" she asked. "One that transforms pain into something beautiful." Lucian moved toward the door, his footsteps silent. "I'll send a car tomorrow at dawn. Bring nothing but your tools. Everything else will be provided." "And if I refuse?" He paused in the doorway, backlit by the hall's fluorescent light. "Then you'll spend the rest of your life as a footnote in Julian Ashford's success story. The talented girlfriend who couldn't handle his brilliance." His dark eyes met hers. "Is that the ending you want, Miss Vance?" He left before she could answer. Arya sat in the gray light, surrounded by her bottles and her failure, and smelled the faint trace of smoke he'd left behind. She didn't sleep the rest of that night. Instead, she researched. Lucien Devereaux existed, but barely. A few mentions in French business journals from 20 years ago. Something about luxury acquisitions, hostile takeovers, a shipping empire built on his family's old fortune. Then nothing. He'd disappeared from public record completely. The address Mika found was a private estate in Provence. No photos, no social media, no paper trail. Just a name and a place that might as well be another planet. "This is a terrible idea," Mika said over the phone at 4 a.m., her voice thick with exhaustion. "This man breaks into your apartment and offers you some vague deal, and you're actually considering it?" "He knew about my mother," Arya said quietly. Silence on the line. "No one knows about my mother. I never told Julian. I never told anyone except you." "Which means he's either a stalker or he's telling the truth about watching me, about everything." "Arya," Mika's voice cracked, "please think about this. You don't know this man. You don't know what he wants." I know what I want. Arya stared at the bottles on her shelves, each one a failure or an almost success or a beautiful thing no one would ever smell. I want my work back. I want my name back. I want Julian and Celeste to know they didn't break me. And you think this mysterious billionaire is going to give you that? I think I'm going to find out. The car arrived at dawn, a black Mercedes with diplomatic plates and a driver who said nothing. Arya climbed in with her leather case of tools and bottles, her mother's journal, and the clothes on her back. The car pulled away from Brooklyn as the city woke around her. 1,000,000 people starting 1,000,000 days that would continue long after she disappeared into whatever this was. They drove to a private airfield. The plane was small, sleek, and waiting. Arya had never been on a private jet. She'd never been to Europe except for her fragrance training in Grasse, which she'd paid for by working 3 jobs and sleeping in a hostel that smelled like mildew and broken dreams. This was different. The plane's interior was all leather and dark wood, and that particular kind of luxury that whispers rather than shouts. And still, no Lucien. "Where is he?" Arya asked the flight attendant, a severe woman in her 50s who poured champagne without asking if Arya wanted it. "Monsieur Devereux will meet you at the estate," the woman said. "He doesn't fly." Doesn't or won't. Does it matter? They were in the air before Arya could think of a response. Provence looked like a painting. Green hills rolled toward lavender fields that stretched to the horizon, broken by clusters of stone buildings with terracotta roofs. The car, a different car, same silence, drove through a landscape that seemed caught in a different century. No billboards, no strip malls, just earth and sky and the weight of time. The estate appeared without warning, hidden behind a wall of cypress trees. The gates opened on their own. The car climbed a gravel drive toward a house that was less a house and more a small castle. Honey-colored stone, climbing roses, windows that reflected the late afternoon sun like closed eyes. Arya stepped out into air that smelled like herbs and heat and history. Her gift immediately cataloged everything: rosemary from the garden, old stone warmed by centuries of sun, lavender from the distant fields, and underneath it all, nothing. That same empty space that meant Lucien was near. He stood in the doorway, wearing dark linen and watching her with those depthless eyes. "Miss Vance, welcome to Domaine Devereux." The house swallowed her. Room after room of elegant emptiness, high ceilings, antique furniture, art that probably belonged in museums. A housekeeper appeared, gray-haired and silent, and led Arya upstairs to a bedroom that was larger than her entire Brooklyn studio. "Dinner's at 8, the woman said in accented English. "Monsieur Devereux requests your presence." Requests or requires? The housekeeper almost smiled. "With Monsieur, there is no difference." Arya spent the hour before dinner exploring. The house had a library with books in 6 languages, a music room with a grand piano no one seemed to play, and a conservatory filled with plants she didn't recognize. But no laboratory, no workspace, nothing that suggested why Lucien had brought her here. She dressed in the only nice thing she'd brought, a simple black dress she'd worn to Julian's gallery openings, and went downstairs at 8 exactly. The dining room could have seated 20. Lucien sat at one end of a massive oak table, reading something on a tablet. He looked up when she entered. "Sit." Not an invitation, a statement. Arya sat at the opposite end, separated by what felt like a football field of polished wood. A woman she hadn't seen before brought soup, something with fennel and white beans that smelled better than anything Arya had eaten in months. "You have questions," Lucien said. "About 1,000. Ask 3. Arya set down her spoon. "Why me?" "Because you're brilliant. Because you were betrayed. Because you have nothing left to protect." He took a sip of wine. "Next question. What perfume do you want me to create? One that doesn't exist yet. One that requires skills beyond technical expertise." His dark eyes found hers across the distance. "One that requires you to understand suffering." The room felt colder. "Last question," Lucien said. "Why don't you smell like anything?" For the first time, something crossed his face. Not quite surprise, maybe interest. An astute observation. He set down his glass. "Most people don't notice." "I notice everything." "Yes, that's why you're here." He stood, and Arya realized dinner was over. Your laboratory is in the East Wing. You'll begin tomorrow. Create your perfume, Miss Vance. You have 1 year. Don't waste it. He left her alone in the vast dining room, surrounded by the ghosts of questions she hadn't asked. That night, Arya lay in a bed that cost more than everything she'd ever owned and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in this house, Lucien Devereaux was doing whatever mysterious billionaires did in the dark, planning, scheming, existing in that strange absence she still couldn't read. She thought about Julian, probably celebrating with Celeste in some Manhattan penthouse. Thought about her mother, who died chasing the perfect scent. Thought about the choice she'd made. To come here, to trust a man she couldn't read, to bet her entire future on a promise that might be a beautiful lie. Outside, the wind carried the scent of lavender and summer and something else. Something that smelled like smoke and secrets and the particular kind of danger that doesn't announce itself. Arya closed her eyes and let herself fall into it. Whatever happened next, at least it would be hers. The laboratory was a converted orangery on the far side of the estate, all glass walls and iron framework that let in impossible amounts of light. Arya found it the next morning after getting lost twice in corridors that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking. The housekeeper, whose name, she'd learned, was Marguerite, had given her directions with the kind of patience usually reserved for small children, then disappeared back into whatever silent routine kept the house running. Inside the orangery, Arya stopped breathing. Every piece of equipment she'd ever dreamed of owning was there. A custom distillation setup that must have cost 6 figures. Temperature-controlled storage for absolutes and essential oils. A gas chromatograph for breaking down molecular structures. Shelves lined with ingredients she'd only read about. Oud from Cambodia. Rose Otto from Bulgaria. Ambergris so pure it glowed gold in the morning light. Do you approve? Arya spun. Lucien stood in the doorway, dressed in black again, his hands in his pockets. She hadn't heard him approach. She never heard him approach. This is... She couldn't find words. This is insane. This equipment alone. Cost doesn't concern me. Results do. He moved into the space and Arya caught that same absence where his scent should be, like he existed slightly outside normal reality. You have everything you need. Now create what I asked for. A perfume that transforms pain into something beautiful. Arya turned back to the equipment, running her fingers along the glass of the distillation column. That's not a formula. That's poetry. Then make the poetry real. You still haven't told me what this is for, why you need this specific thing. Lucien was quiet for a long moment. When Arya looked back, he was studying her with that unreadable expression, dark eyes giving away nothing. That's not your concern, he said finally. Your concern is creation. Mine is purpose. And if I can't do it, if what you're asking for doesn't exist, then you'll spend a year in paradise failing. Something that might have been amusement touched his mouth. I've been told there are worse fates. He left before she could respond. Arya stood in the glass room, surrounded by a fortune in equipment and ingredients, and realized she had no idea where to start. The first week was a disaster. Arya tried everything, layering rose with opoponax for that dark sweet balance, mixing frankincense and myrrh for something sacred, even attempting a base of black pepper and leather to evoke transformation through struggle. Nothing worked. The perfumes smelled expensive, complex, even beautiful in their own right. But they weren't what Lucien wanted. They didn't transform anything. They were just scent. You're thinking too technically, Lucien said one afternoon, appearing in the orangery doorway as Arya stared at her latest failure, a combination of iris and vetiver that smelled like regret, but nothing else. I'm a perfumer. Technical is what I do. You're an artist who happens to work with scent. He moved closer, picking up one of the testing strips she'd discarded. This smells like sadness. Accurate, well-constructed sadness. But it doesn't go anywhere. It just sits there, being sad. Then tell me what you want it to smell like. I can't. If I could describe it, I wouldn't need you. Arya threw the testing strip down harder than necessary. This is impossible. You're asking me to create something that doesn't have a definition, with no guidance, on a timeline that's already slipping away. I can't read your mind, Lucien. I can't even read you at all. The words hung in the air between them. Lucien's expression didn't change, but something in the room's temperature seemed to drop. What do you mean by that? His voice was quieter than usual. Arya hesitated. She'd been trying not to think about it, the way he existed in that blank space her gift couldn't touch, like a person-shaped void. It unnerved her in ways she couldn't articulate. Everyone has a scent, she said carefully. Emotional scent, underneath whatever perfume or soap they use. I've had this ability since I was a child. I can smell fear, joy, lying, love, all of it. But you, she met his dark eyes. You don't smell like anything. It's like you're not there. Lucian was very still. And that frightens you. It makes you impossible to read. I don't know if you're angry or amused or planning to murder me in my sleep. You're just blank. Would it help, he said slowly, if I told you I'm not planning to murder you? Depends on whether you're lying, which I can't tell, because you don't smell like anything. For the first time since she'd met him, Lucien almost smiled. Not quite, but close enough that Arya saw the ghost of it. I'm not lying, Miss Vance. You're safe here. From me, at least. He set down the testing strip. As for why you can't read me, that's a longer conversation. One we'll have when you've made more progress on the perfume. So it's a trade. Information for results. Everything is a trade. He moved toward the door, then paused. Your mother could read people through scent as well. Did you know that? Arya's breath caught. How do you... She had a theory that some people build walls so high, even scent can't penetrate them. That the human mind, when sufficiently damaged, learns to hide even from those who can see the invisible. His voice remained flat, but something underneath it felt raw. She was right. Good evening, Miss Vance. He left Arya standing in the golden afternoon light, her heart pounding, her mind racing. Lucien had known her mother. He'd known her mother's theories, her research, things Arya had only found in journals after Isabel died, which meant his connection to her past went deeper than watching from afar, which meant everything about this arrangement was more complicated than revenge. That night, Arya couldn't sleep. She lay in the enormous bed, staring at ceiling frescoes of angels and clouds, and thought about her mother. Isabel Vance had been brilliant and obsessed and ultimately consumed by her work. The fire that killed her had started in her laboratory at 3 a.m, Isabel working late, as always, chasing some formula she'd never finished. Arya had been 12, asleep in their small apartment above the lab. She'd woken to smoke and screaming, and Marguerite... Wait. Arya sat up fast enough to make her head spin. Marguerite. The housekeeper here had the same name as the woman who'd pulled Arya from the burning building that night. The woman who'd held her while firefighters tried and failed to reach Isabel. It couldn't be the same person. That had been in Grasse 16 years ago. This was Provence now, just a coincidence. Except Lucien didn't seem like a man who believed in coincidence. Arya got out of bed, pulled on a robe, and went downstairs. The house was dark, except for pale moonlight through tall windows. She moved through corridors that felt different at night, less elegant, more haunted, following instinct more than memory toward the kitchen. She found Marguerite there, sitting at a worn wooden table with a cup of tea and a book. The older woman looked up without surprise. Can't sleep? Were you in Grasse? Arya asked. 16 years ago. Were you there? Marguerite closed her book slowly. Her face in the dim light looked ancient and tired. Sit down, child. Arya sat. Marguerite poured her tea from a pot that smelled like chamomile and something herbal Arya couldn't place. I worked for your mother, Marguerite said quietly. I was her laboratory assistant. I was there the night she died. The room tilted. Arya gripped the edge of the table. You saved me. I pulled you from the building. I couldn't save Isabel. Marguerite's voice cracked slightly. The fire spread too fast. By the time anyone realized, it was too late. Why didn't you tell me? When I arrived here, why didn't you say anything? Because Monsieur Devereaux asked me not to. He wanted you to settle in first, to focus on the work. Marguerite's weathered hands wrapped around her teacup. He knew it would be difficult for you, being here, knowing the connections. What connections? How does Lucien know about my mother? How do you both... That's his story to tell, not mine. Marguerite met Arya's eyes. But I'll tell you this. Everything Lucien does has a reason. He doesn't act on impulse. He doesn't make careless decisions. If he brought you here, if he's asking you to create this perfume, it's because he believes you can do what your mother couldn't. My mother wasn't trying to create a perfume that transforms pain. Wasn't she? Marguerite stood, picking up her book. Your mother spent her last 5 years trying to capture the scent of grief. She believed that if she could distill loss into something tangible, she could understand it, master it, maybe even change it into something else. She died before she found the answer. She paused in the doorway, backlit by the hallway's faint glow. Lucien thinks you're the one who can finish what she started. I hope he's right, for both your sakes. Arya sat alone in the dark kitchen, drinking chamomile tea, and felt the weight of 16 years settle onto her shoulders. The work changed after that. Arya stopped trying to create beautiful perfumes and started trying to create true ones. She thought about her mother, working herself to death chasing an impossible formula. Thought about Julian, whose betrayal still tasted like copper in the back of her throat. Thought about Lucien, who existed in that strange blank space, hiding something so painful even scent couldn't find it. She started with smoke, burned wood and tobacco and the sharp resin of frankincense, then added jasmine, not the sweet kind but the bruised, overblown flowers past their prime, saffron for bitterness, labdanum for something animal and wounded. The combination smelled like destruction, like the moment after the fire consumes everything and all that's left is ash and memory. Better, Lucien said when she showed him. He'd taken to visiting the orangery every afternoon, sitting in the corner with a book while Arya worked. His presence was distracting in ways she tried not to examine. But it's still just destruction. Where's the transformation? I don't know how to bottle hope, Arya said, frustrated. Then don't bottle hope. Bottle survival. She tried again. Added orris root for something powdery and rebuilding. Orange blossom for resilience. The perfume started to shift. Less about the fire, more about what grew in the scorched earth after. But it still wasn't right. It smelled like recovery, not transformation. Like putting yourself back together, not becoming something new. You're still being too literal, Lucien said one evening. They'd fallen into a pattern, working until sunset, then sharing dinner in the smaller dining room off the kitchen. Not quite together, but not quite separate. Pain doesn't transform into joy. It transforms into wisdom, into capacity, into the ability to hold more than you could before. You sound like you're speaking from experience. His dark eyes found hers across the table. Everyone speaks from experience, Miss Vance. Some of us just have more of it than others. Are you ever going to tell me why you don't have a scent? Are you ever going to stop asking? No. Something that might have been respect crossed his face. Then I suppose eventually I'll have to answer. The weeks blurred together. Spring shifted toward summer. The lavender fields bloomed purple and impossibly fragrant. Arya fell into a rhythm. Mornings in the orangery, afternoons walking the grounds while her mind worked through formulas, evenings with Lucien where they talked about everything except the things that mattered. She learned he spoke 6 languages, that he'd lived in a dozen countries, that he read philosophy and poetry with the same intensity he brought to everything else. She learned he took his coffee black and his whiskey neat and never, ever slept past dawn. What she didn't learn was why. Why he lived alone in this beautiful prison. Why he needed this specific perfume. Why he'd known her mother. Why he existed in that empty space her gift couldn't reach. You're staring, Lucien said one afternoon. He hadn't looked up from his book, but somehow he knew. I'm observing. You're trying to solve me. It won't work. Arya set down the beaker she'd been holding. Why not? Because I don't want to be solved. He turned a page. Some puzzles are better left incomplete. That's a sad way to live. Sadness is relative. Is that what you are? Sad? Finally, he looked at her. The late afternoon sun turned his dark eyes almost amber. I'm many things, Miss Vance. Sad is one of them, but not the most important one. What's the most important one? Careful. He went back to his book. Careful is what keeps you alive. That night, Arya dreamed about fire, about her mother, working in a laboratory that looked like the orangery, mixing ingredients that sparked and burned, about Lucien, standing in the flames but not burning, untouched by the heat, about herself. 12 years old and screaming, unable to reach either of them. She woke to moonlight and the smell of smoke. Real smoke, not dream smoke. For a horrible second, she thought the house was on fire. Then she realized it was coming from outside. Arya ran to the window. In the garden below, Lucien stood beside a small fire burning in an iron brazier. He was feeding papers into it, watching them curl and blacken. Even from this distance, even through glass and shadow, Arya could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he stood like a man holding himself together through sheer will. She should have gone back to bed, should have given him privacy. Instead, she pulled on a robe and went downstairs. The garden was cool and silver dark. Lucien didn't turn when she approached, but she knew he heard her. "Can't sleep?" His voice was rough. "I smelled smoke. Thought the house was burning." "Just paper, old contracts, things that don't matter anymore." Arya moved closer. In the firelight, Lucien looked different, older, more human, less like the controlled creature he showed the world. She could smell the smoke on him now, mixing with that faint scent of expensive wool and something else, something that might have been emotion, if emotion could exist in someone who didn't have a scent. "What date is it?" she asked quietly. "August 3rd. Does that mean something?" His jaw tightened. "It means nothing and everything, depending on how you measure time." "Lucien, go back to bed, Arya." He'd never used her first name before. It landed between them like something breakable. "Not until you tell me why you're burning papers at 2 in the morning. Because 16 years ago today, I made a promise I couldn't keep." He threw another paper into the fire. "Because I failed someone who trusted me. Because some debts can never be repaid, no matter how long you try." Arya's breath caught. "What kind of promise?" Lucien turned to face her fully. In the firelight, his eyes looked hollow, lost. For just a moment, the careful control slipped, and Arya saw something underneath, not absence, but an ocean of feelings so deep and dark it had learned to hide from everything, even itself. "I promised your mother I'd protect you," he said quietly, "and then I let her die." The world tilted. Arya grabbed the back of a garden bench for support. "What?" "I was there that night, in Grasse. I was the one who caused the fire." "No." The word came out automatic. "No, the investigator said it was an electrical fault, a short in the wiring. It was an accident." "It was my fault." Lucien's voice was flat again, all that emotion locked back down. "Your mother was helping me with something, a project I needed her expertise for. We were working late, past when we should have stopped. I was careless. I knocked over a heating element near some alcohol. The fire spread before either of us could react." "You were there." Arya felt like she was falling. "You were in the laboratory with her." "I tried to reach her. Marguerite pulled me back. By the time we got you out, by the time the firefighters arrived." His hands clenched. "She was already gone, and I had to live with the knowledge that I killed the one person who'd shown me kindness without wanting something in return." "Why didn't you tell me? Why bring me here? Why put me through all this?" "Because I owe her." The words came out harsh. "Because I spent 16 years building a fortune so I could keep the promise I made that night, to watch over you, to make sure you survived, to make sure her gift didn't die with her." "The perfume," Arya whispered, "the one you want me to create, it's not for you. It's for her, for Isabel. She spent her last years trying to capture grief and transform it. I want you to finish what she started, to prove that her death wasn't meaningless, that something beautiful can come from that much pain." Arya's legs gave out. She sat hard on the bench, her mind racing. Everything she'd thought about this arrangement, about Lucien's motives, about why she was here, all of it was wrong. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about using her talent for some mysterious purpose. It was about guilt, about a debt that couldn't be repaid, about a man who'd spent 16 years punishing himself for a moment of carelessness. "You didn't kill her," Arya said finally. "It was an accident." "Accidents still have consequences." "And you think making me create this perfume will somehow absolve you?" "No." Lucien's voice was quiet. "Nothing will absolve me. But maybe it will give her work meaning. Maybe it will give you back what was taken. Maybe that's enough." He started to turn away. Arya stood, reaching out to catch his arm. The moment she touched him, something shocked through her, a jolt of sensation so strong it made her gasp. For just a second, the blank space where his scent should be cracked open, and Arya smelled everything. Grief like burning roses, guilt like rust and blood, loneliness so profound it had its own gravity, and underneath it all, buried so deep she almost missed it, hope. Tiny and terrified and desperately fragile. Then it was gone. Lucien pulled back and the walls slammed down again. "Don't," he said roughly, "yet by... You're not empty." Arya's voice shook. "You're not blank. You're just locked so far down you've forgotten how to feel anything that isn't controlled." Feeling accomplishes nothing. Feeling is everything. It's the whole point. You can't transform pain if you won't let yourself experience it. I experience it every day. No, you bury it. You hide from it. You've built a fortress so complete even you can't get inside anymore. Arya stepped closer. That's why you can't smell like anything. You've locked yourself away so thoroughly you've stopped existing emotionally. You're a ghost, Lucien. You've made yourself into a ghost. His eyes were black in the firelight. Perhaps that's all I deserve to be. Or perhaps, Arya said quietly, you're as trapped as I was. You just have a bigger, prettier cage. Something crossed his face, shock maybe, or recognition. They stood there in the silver garden, the fire burning down to embers between them, and Arya understood. This perfume wasn't about her mother. Not really. It was about Lucien, about a man who'd spent 16 years locked in his own carefully constructed prison, unable to feel, unable to connect, unable to do anything but exist in that terrible blank space where emotion couldn't reach him. He needed her to create a perfume that transformed pain because he'd forgotten how to transform it himself. I'll finish it, Arya said. Not for revenge, not for my career, for you. Because you saved my life that night, even if you don't believe it. Because you kept your promise, even if the method was strange. Because someone needs to tell you that you're allowed to feel things again. Lucien looked at her for a long moment. Then, without a word, he turned and walked back toward the house, leaving Arya alone with the dying fire and the understanding that nothing about this arrangement was what it seemed. She went back to her room, opened her mother's journal, the one she'd brought from New York, filled with Isabel's notes and theories and half-finished formulas. Found the page she'd skipped over before, the one dated 3 weeks before the fire, working with L on the grief project. He's brilliant but damaged in ways I can't reach. His emotional walls are absolute. He's convinced himself that feeling leads to weakness, that control is the only thing keeping him alive. But control isn't living, it's just a slower kind of death. If I could create this perfume, if I could show him that pain can be transformed without being locked away, maybe he'd let himself be human again. Maybe he'd let himself heal. The entry ended there. Isabel had never finished the project, never found the answer. But Arya would. She spent the next 3 weeks working with a focus that bordered on obsession. She went back to the beginning, stripped everything down to basics, started with the scent of grief, smoke and dying flowers, and something mineral that tasted like tears, then built slowly upward, not toward joy, not toward recovery, toward capacity. The ability to hold pain and beauty in the same space, to acknowledge loss without being consumed by it. She added unexpected things, sea salt for cleansing, whetstone for something ancient and enduring, fig for sweetness that came after bitterness. The perfume started to smell less like a memorial and more like a promise, less about what was lost and more about what could be gained by surviving the loss. Lucien watched her work. Closer now, less hidden. Sometimes he asked questions. Sometimes he just sat in the corner with his book, pretending to read while his attention stayed on her. The walls between them had shifted. Not broken, Lucien's walls wouldn't break that easily, but maybe cracked enough to let a little light through. Tell me about her, Arya said one afternoon. About my mother. What was she like when you knew her? Lucien was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, brilliant, relentless, kind in ways that hurt because they were so rare. She looked at me and saw a person, not a fortune or a name. She made me believe, for a few weeks at least, that I could be something other than what I'd built myself into. She had that effect on people. Did she ever tell you about me? Arya shook her head. I was 12. She kept her work separate, but I remember her being excited about a project that last month. She came home late smelling like smoke and something expensive I couldn't place. I thought it was just another commission. It wasn't a commission. I didn't pay her. She helped because she wanted to. His voice dropped. She said everyone deserved the chance to feel whole again, even people who'd forgotten how. She was right. Was she? Lucian's dark eyes met hers. Or are some people too broken to be fixed? No one's too broken. Arya turned back to her work. They just need the right catalyst. By mid-August, she was close. The perfume still wasn't perfect. Something in the heart notes felt incomplete, but it was transforming. It smelled like grief opening into wisdom, like pain that had been acknowledged and integrated instead of buried, like the specific kind of beauty that only exists because it survived destruction. I need to test it, Arya said one evening, on someone, to see if it works. Test it on me. She looked up sharply. Lucien stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Are you sure? If this works the way I think it will, I'm sure. Arya's hands shook slightly as she prepared the testing strip, dipped it in the perfume she'd spent months creating, offered it to Lucien. He took it, lifted it to his nose, breathed in. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Lucien's eyes closed, his breath caught. The testing strip fell from his fingers. Arya watched him break. Not collapse, Lucien would never collapse, but something inside him cracked wide open. 16 years of locked-away emotion hitting him all at once. Grief and guilt and loneliness. And that tiny, terrified hope she'd smelled once and never again. His shoulders shook. His breathing turned ragged. He grabbed the edge of the workbench like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Lucien, it works. His voice broke. It works. I can feel... He couldn't finish. Arya crossed the space between them without thinking, her arms going around him. Lucien went rigid for half a second, then his control shattered completely. He buried his face against her shoulder and came apart in ways he'd probably never let himself come apart before. Arya held him while he shook. Held him while 16 years of carefully managed emotion crashed over him like a flood. Held him through the wreckage of all those walls he'd built, crumbling at last. And for the first time since she'd met him, Lucien Devereaux smelled like something. Like roses burning, like hope fighting through ashes. Like a man who'd forgotten how to be human, finally remembering. They didn't speak about it afterward. Lucien disappeared into the house while Arya stood alone in the orangery, her hands still shaking, the scent of the perfume hanging in the air like a question that had finally been answered. She'd done it. She'd created what he'd asked for, what her mother had died trying to finish. But nothing felt triumphant, just raw and exposed and uncertain in ways Arya hadn't expected. She found him the next morning in the library, sitting by a window with a book he wasn't reading. The early light made his profile sharp as cut glass. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment neither of them knew what to say. "I'm sorry," Arya started. "Don't." His voice was rough, like he'd spent the night not sleeping. "Don't apologize for doing what I asked you to do. I didn't know it would..." "Neither did I." He closed the book. "But it worked. That's what matters." Arya moved closer, studying his face. He still looked like himself, controlled, distant, unreadable, but something had shifted underneath, like a fault line that had finally released pressure it had been holding for years. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Regret what? Feeling something for the first time in 16 years? He almost smiled. "Ask me in a week, when I remember how to function like a normal person." "You've never functioned like a normal person." "Fair point." The silence stretched between them, not quite comfortable but not hostile either. Outside the window, the lavender fields rippled in the breeze, purple and impossibly beautiful. Arya thought about New York, about Julian and Celeste and the life she'd left behind. It felt like looking at someone else's memory, like it had happened to a different person entirely. "What now?" she asked. Lucien stood, moving to a cabinet built into the library wall. He opened it and removed something wrapped in dark cloth. When he set it on the desk between them, Arya saw it was a small leather case. "Now, we test whether I kept my end of the bargain." He opened the case. Inside were documents, contracts, legal papers, things with official seals and signatures. Arya's name appeared on half of them. "What is this?" "Proof." Lucien spread the documents across the desk. Proof that you created the Reverie formula 2 years before Julian Ashford claimed it. Proof of your original notes, your development timeline, your testing results. Proof that he had access to all of it and used it without permission. Arya's breath caught. How did you? I told you I've been watching you for a long time. I had people document everything. Photograph your journals, record your process, all of it admissible in court, all of it time-stamped and verified. His dark eyes met hers. Julian Ashford and Celeste Castellane built their launch on stolen work. This proves it. Why didn't you tell me you had this? Because you needed to finish the Perfume first. Because I needed to know you were here for the right reasons, not just revenge. He paused. And because I wanted to give you a choice. What choice? You can take this evidence public, destroy Julian's reputation, reclaim your work, get everything you came here for. Lucian tapped the documents. Or you can walk away. Let them have it. Build something new instead of fighting for what they stole. Arya stared at the papers, her life's work reduced to legal proof, and felt something strange twist in her chest. 3 months ago, she would have grabbed this evidence and run straight to the nearest lawyer. Would have burned Julian and Celeste down without a second thought. Would have done anything to reclaim what was hers. But now, standing in this French library with a man who'd spent 16 years trying to atone for one terrible mistake, revenge felt smaller, less important, like the kind of thing that mattered to the person she used to be, not the person she was becoming. I don't know, she admitted. Then don't decide yet. Lucienne gathered the papers back into the case. We have time, and I have a proposition. Another one? A different one. A trip. To Istanbul. Arya blinked. Why Istanbul? Because I have business there. Because you've been locked in that orangery for 3 months, and you're starting to look like a ghost. Because the best Turkish rose oil comes from a supplier I work with, and I thought you might want to see it. He closed the case. Because maybe both of us could use some distance from this place. That's not a proposition. That's 4 different reasons that don't quite line up. Then pick the one you like best. She studied him. This man who'd brought her here under false pretenses, who'd known her mother, who'd just broken open in her arms and was now pretending nothing had changed. Except something had changed. She could see it in the way he held himself, slightly less rigid. Could smell it in the air between them, that faint scent of roses and hope that hadn't been there before. When do we leave? Something that might have been relief crossed his face. Tomorrow, pack light. We'll be gone a week. They flew private again, because of course Lucian didn't do commercial flights. The plane was different this time, smaller, faster, with an interior that looked like someone's very expensive living room. Arya sat by a window and watched France disappear beneath them, replaced by clouds, and then water, and then the geometric sprawl of cities she couldn't name. Lucien worked on a laptop, his attention absorbed by whatever mysterious business kept him wealthy and isolated. Arya tried not to watch him, tried not to notice the way he'd loosened his tie somewhere over the Alps, or the way his expression shifted when he thought no one was looking, less blank now, more present, like he was slowly remembering how to exist in his own skin. You're staring again, he said without looking up. I'm observing. Observe something else. There's nothing else interesting on this plane. He finally looked at her, one eyebrow raised. Is that a compliment or an insult? I haven't decided yet. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close enough that Arya felt something warm settle in her chest. They were learning each other, she realized. Learning how to be around each other without the weight of that impossible perfume between them. Learning what this was now that the original arrangement had been fulfilled. Istanbul hit them like a wall of heat and sound and smell the moment they landed. Even through the private terminal, Arya could sense the city. Spices and exhaust and salt water, a million lives pressed close together, creating something that was part chaos and part poetry. She'd never been anywhere like this. New York was sharp and angular. Grass had been soft and green. This was something else entirely. Something that felt alive in ways she couldn't articulate. Stay close, Lucian said as they moved through the terminal. Istanbul can be overwhelming if you're not used to it. I can handle overwhelming. Can you handle Kadir? Who's Kadir? Someone I've known for 20 years, someone who will absolutely try to marry you off to one of his nephews if you're not careful. Arya laughed despite herself. I'd like to see him try. Kadir turned out to be a bear of a man with a white beard and eyes that crinkled at the corners from decades of smiling. He met them outside the terminal, pulling Lucien into an embrace that would have broken a smaller person. Ah, my ghost returns, Kadir's voice boomed. 2 years you make me wait. 2 years. I thought you died in that French tomb of yours. Good to see you too, Kadir. And you brought a woman. Finally. I'd given up hope. Kadir turned his attention to Arya, his assessment quick and thorough. Let me guess. Perfumer, smart, stubborn, not impressed by money. Am I right? 444, Arya said. Kadir laughed, a sound like rolling thunder. I like her. She can stay. You, on the other hand, he pointed at Lucien, still owe me for that shipment you canceled last year. I paid you double. Money isn't everything. Sometimes a man wants an apology. I don't apologize. Which is why you're alone in that estate with only Marguerite for company. Kadir's expression softened. Come, let's get you both to the hotel. Then tomorrow, we talk business. Tonight, we eat like humans instead of hermits. The hotel was tucked in Sultan Ahmet, close enough to the blue mosque that Arya could see its minarets from her window. The room was all dark wood and brass fixtures and rugs that probably cost more than her Brooklyn studio. Lucien had a suite down the hall, separate but near, professional but not quite distant. She didn't examine that too closely. Dinner was at a restaurant Kadir claimed had been serving the same menu for 300 years. They sat on cushions around a low table while servers brought dish after dish. Lamb that fell apart at the touch, bread still hot from the oven, vegetables cooked in olive oil, and herbs Arya couldn't name. Kadir and Lucien talked business in rapid Turkish, occasionally switching to French when they wanted to include her. Arya mostly listened, watching the way Lucien relaxed in Kadir's presence, some of that careful control slipping. So, Kadir said eventually, switching fully to English and fixing Arya with that penetrating stare. How long have you two been lovers? Arya choked on her wine. Lucien went very still. We're not, Arya started. Please, Kadir interrupted. I have eyes. I see the way he looks at you when you're not watching. The way you watch him when you think no one notices. This is not business. This is something else. Kadir, Lucien's voice held a warning. What? I'm old. I say what I see. Besides, it's about time you let yourself want something other than isolation and punishment. Kadir leaned back, his expression knowing. 16 years you've been hiding. 16 years paying penance for something that was an accident. Maybe it's time to stop hiding. This isn't the place. There's never a good place for uncomfortable truths. That's why they're uncomfortable. Kadir turned back to Arya. He told you about the fire? Yes. Did he tell you he tried to go back inside? That we had to physically restrain him? That he broke 3 of his ribs fighting us? Arya looked at Lucien. His jaw was tight, his expression locked down again. But underneath, that faint scent of roses and something burning, emotion trying to surface. He didn't mention that part, Arya said quietly. Of course he didn't. Lucien doesn't believe in giving himself credit for anything except failure. Kadir shook his head. Your mother knew, though. Isabel knew. Before she died, she told us, that if anything happened, we should watch over you. Make sure you survived. She made Lucien promise, and he's kept that promise every day since, even if his method was strange. Kadir, that's enough. Lucien's voice was flat. No, it's not. Because this girl, this woman, she should know what you did, how you've protected her from the shadows, how you destroyed 3 people who tried to take advantage of her talent, how you've been making sure she had opportunities, had chances, had everything she needed to succeed. Arya's blood went cold. What do you mean, destroyed 3 people? Before Julian, Kadir waved a hand. A gallery owner in Paris who wanted to exploit her. A fragrance house owner in London who had predatory contracts. A professor in New York who, well, let's just say he won't be teaching anymore. Lucien made sure of it, made sure they couldn't hurt you. I don't need protecting, Arya said, her voice sharp. Everyone needs protecting sometimes, Kadir replied. Even stubborn perfumers who think they can handle the world alone. The dinner ended shortly after that. Lucien paid despite Kadir's protests, and they left in uncomfortable silence. The Istanbul night was warm and loud with life. Music from nearby restaurants, voices in a dozen languages, the distant call to prayer from a mosque somewhere in the darkness. "I didn't ask you to destroy people for me," Arya said as they walked back toward the hotel. "I know. I don't need a guardian angel. I know that too." "Then why?" "Because I promised your mother." Lucien stopped walking, turning to face her. In the streetlight, his features looked carved from shadow. "Because you were 12 and alone, and I couldn't save her, but I could save you. Because for 16 years, making sure you were safe was the only thing that made any of it bearable." "That's not protection, Lucien, that's obsession." "Maybe." He didn't look away. "But it kept you alive, it kept you creating, and it led you to France, to me, to finishing what your mother started. So maybe my obsession served a purpose." Arya wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at him for manipulating her life, for playing guardian from the shadows, for making decisions about her safety without her knowledge or consent. But standing in this ancient city, looking at a man who'd spent half his life trying to atone for one terrible accident, she couldn't find the anger. "You can't spend the rest of your life paying for something that wasn't your fault," she said quietly. "Watch me." "No." She stepped closer, close enough to catch that scent of roses and hope that was slowly becoming familiar. "You created that perfume with me. You felt what it's supposed to do. You can't transform pain by holding on to it forever. That's not how it works." "Then tell me how it works." "You let it go. You acknowledge what happened, you honor the loss, and then you let yourself move forward. You let yourself be human again. And if I don't know how, then I'll teach you." The words hung between them, too big and too honest and impossible to take back. Lucien stared at her, something moving behind his dark eyes. Surprise, maybe, or fear, or that tiny flame of hope she'd smelled once and couldn't forget. "Why would you do that?" His voice was rough. "Because you kept your promise. Because you protected me even when I didn't know I needed it. Because you're not the monster you've convinced yourself you are." Arya took a breath. "And because I think my mother would want me to." Lucien's control cracked. Not the shattering breakdown from the orangery, but something smaller, more intimate. He reached out slowly, like he was afraid she'd disappear, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek, warm and careful. "You're dangerous," he said softly. "So are you. I could hurt you. You already have, by lying, by manipulating, by watching from the shadows instead of talking to me like an adult." She didn't pull away. "But you're also the reason I'm still creating, still fighting, still here. So maybe we're even." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "We're not even close to even. Then we'll figure it out as we go." Something shifted in his expression. Decision, maybe, or surrender. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, to stop this before it became something neither of them could undo. Arya didn't move, didn't breathe, just waited as the distance between them disappeared. The kiss was careful at first. Testing, like Lucien had forgotten how to do this and was learning again from scratch. Then Arya's hands found his jacket and everything changed. The careful control shattered. 16 years of isolation breaking against 3 months of growing tension. His hands were in her hair, hers pulling him closer, and for a moment the entire city disappeared into that single point of contact. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucien looked almost startled. "That was dangerous," Arya finished. "Extremely. Should we stop?" "Probably." Neither of them moved. They stood there in the Istanbul night, the space between them charged with possibility and risk, and something neither of them had names for yet. "Come upstairs," Lucien said finally. "Just come upstairs. We'll talk. Or not talk, whatever you want." "Is this a good idea?" "Absolutely not." Arya smiled despite herself. "Then let's do it anyway." His hotel suite was 3 times the size of her room, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Bosphorus. The city lights reflected off the water, creating patterns that shifted and changed with the current. Lucien poured them both whiskey without asking if she wanted it, his movements careful, controlled again now that they were alone in private space. I don't know how to do this, he admitted, handing her a glass. Do what? This. Whatever this is. I've spent 16 years alone because it was safer, easier. I don't know how to... He stopped, frustration crossing his face. I don't know how to want things anymore. But you want this. It wasn't a question. Yes. The word came out raw. I want this. I want you. I have wanted you since you showed up in France, looking like you were ready to burn the world down just to feel something again. But wanting and having are different things, Arya. And I don't know if I'm capable of having anything without destroying it. Arya set down her glass, crossed the space between them, took his face in her hands and made him look at her. You're not going to destroy me. I'm not fragile. I'm not your responsibility. I'm a grown woman who can make her own decisions. She held his gaze. And I'm deciding that I want this too. Whatever this is. Even if it's messy, even if it's complicated, even if it scares both of us. I can't promise it'll work. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for honesty, for you to stop treating me like something that needs to be protected from the shadows. For you to be here, present, real. She paused. Can you do that? Lucian's hands came up to cover hers. His eyes closed briefly, like he was reaching for something deep inside himself, some part he'd locked away so long he'd forgotten where the key was. I can try, he said finally. Then that's enough. This kiss was different, less desperate, more certain. Lucian backed her toward the windows, his hands careful but sure, and Arya let herself fall into it. Into him. Into this impossible thing that had started with revenge and transformed into something else entirely. They didn't make it to the bedroom. Couldn't wait that long. There was too much history between them, too much tension that had been building since that first morning in Brooklyn when he'd appeared in her studio like something from a dream. Lucian lifted her onto the window seat, the city spreading out behind them, and Arya wrapped her legs around him and let the rest of the world disappear. Afterward, they lay tangled together on the massive couch, the room dark except for the city lights through the windows. Arya traced patterns on Lucian's chest, feeling his heartbeat slow, feeling him come back to himself. For the first time since she'd known him, he smelled completely present, not locked away, not hidden, just there. I can smell you now, she said quietly. And? And you smell like smoke and roses and something I don't have a name for yet. Something good? Something real. She looked up at him. That's better than good. Lucien's arm tightened around her. Thank you. For what? For not running. For staying. For giving me a reason to stop hiding. His voice dropped. For finishing what your mother started. She'd be proud of you, you know. For keeping your promise. For protecting me all these years. For finally letting yourself feel something again. Would she? Yes. Arya was certain. She would. They fell asleep there, wrapped around each other, the Istanbul night breathing around them. Arya dreamed of fire and roses and her mother's face, smiling, finally at peace. She woke to Lucian already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Morning light turned the Bosphorus silver outside the windows. What? She asked, her voice rough with sleep. Nothing, just... He touched her face, gentle. Just making sure this is real. It's real. Good. And they spent the day with Kadir, visiting his facility where he processed rose oil from Bulgarian and Turkish roses. The place smelled like heaven and hard work. Petals and steam, and the particular kind of richness that only came from distillation done right. Arya lost herself in it, asking questions, testing samples, learning techniques she'd never seen before. Lucien watched from the sidelines, his expression soft in ways she'd never seen. You're good for him, Kadir said quietly, while Arya was examining a batch of Rose Absolute. I don't know about that. I do. I've known Lucien for 20 years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Kadir handed her another sample. He's been alone too long, convinced himself he didn't deserve connection. You're teaching him differently. Or I'm just convenient. No. Kadir's voice was firm. You're essential. There's a difference. That evening, they walked through Sultanahmet as tourists, something Lucien claimed he'd never done despite visiting Istanbul dozens of times. They saw the Blue Mosque, the Hagia Sophia, the Basilica cistern with its upside-down Medusa heads. Arya kept expecting Lucian to retreat back into that careful distance, but he stayed present, held her hand, smiled when she made stupid jokes about tourist traps, existed like a person instead of a ghost. "This is nice," she said as they sat at a cafe watching the sun set over the Bosphorus. "It is. We should do more of this. Normal things, not just work in isolation." "I don't know how to do normal things." "Then we'll learn together." Lucian's hand found hers across the table. "I'd like that." They flew back to France 3 days later. Something fundamental shifted between them. Not fixed, nothing was fixed yet, but different, better, more honest. Lucien still had his walls, still retreated into silence sometimes, still struggled with feeling things after so long locked away. But he was trying, and Arya was patient. The orangery felt different when she returned to it. Not finished. She hadn't completed the final perfume yet, the one that would go to production, but closer. Like the answer was finally within reach. She worked through September, refining the formula, adjusting the balance, creating something that could be replicated and bottled and shared with the world. Lucien spent more time with her now, not just watching, but participating, learning. He had a good nose despite no formal training, could pick out individual notes, understood instinctively what worked and what didn't. They developed a rhythm, Arya creating, Lucien testing, both of them pushing towards something that felt true. "What will you call it?" Lucien asked one afternoon in early October. "I don't know yet." Arya held up a testing strip. "It needs a name that captures what it does. Transformation, survival, hope after loss." "Phoenix." She looked at him. "What?" "Phoenix, rising from ashes, becoming something new through destruction. That's what this is." "Phoenix," Arya repeated, testing the sound. "Yes, that's perfect." They bottled the first official batch in late October. Small glass bottles with simple labels, nothing fancy. The perfume itself was the statement, that dark, complex scent of grief transforming into wisdom, pain opening into capacity. Arya sent samples to 3 fragrance houses, carefully selected with a note explaining the formula's origin and her role in creating it. 2 weeks later, she had offers from all 3. Not just offers, bidding wars. Everyone wanted Phoenix. Everyone wanted the perfumer who'd created something that shouldn't exist. "You did it," Lucien said when she showed him the contracts. "You got everything back." "We did it," Arya corrected. "This was always both of us." "What about Julian? The evidence I showed you?" Arya thought about it. About revenge, about reclaiming what was stolen, about destroying the people who'd hurt her. 3 months ago, she would have grabbed that evidence and watched Julian's world burn. But now, "I don't need it," she said. "Phoenix proves who I am, what I can do. Julian can keep reverie. I don't want it anymore. I want this. Something new. Something that's completely mine." Lucien studied her face. "You're sure?" "Yes." And she was. "Let him have his stolen success. I have something better. Something real." He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, and for a moment they just stood there in the orangery, surrounded by the scent of transformation and new beginnings. "What happens now?" Arya asked against his chest. "Now you decide what you want. You can take one of these offers, go back to New York, build your career. Or you can stay here, work with me, create things together." He pulled back to look at her. "I'm offering you a partnership, Arya. Real partnership, equal collaboration. You bring the artistry, I bring the business knowledge. We build something neither of us could build alone. And the rest of it? What we are to each other? That too. If you want it." His voice dropped. "I want it. I want you. Not just as a collaborator. Not just as someone who finishes my impossible projects. As..." She kissed him before he could finish. Poured everything she felt into it. Gratitude and desire, and that growing certainty that this strange, complicated thing between them was becoming something real. When they broke apart, Lucien was smiling, actually smiling, open and genuine. "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes to all of it. Partnership, collaboration, whatever this is." Arya grinned. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you leave the estate occasionally. Can't have you turning back into a ghost." "Deal." They sealed it with another kiss, the October sun streaming through the orangery glass, the scent of phoenix hanging in the air like a promise finally kept. That night, lying in Lucien's bed, their bed now, she supposed, Arya thought about everything that had led here, Julian's betrayal, the impossible offer, 3 months of work and revelation and slowly learning each other. Istanbul, the perfume, the choice to let go of revenge and build something new instead. "I never thanked you," she said into the darkness. "For what?" "For the car that morning, for bringing me to France, for keeping your promise to my mother even when I didn't know you were keeping it." Lucien's hand found hers. "I should thank you, for finishing what she started, for teaching me how to feel again, for giving me a reason to stop hiding. We're even then. Not even close. Then I guess we'll have to keep trying." His laugh was quiet, but it was there, real and present, and completely his. Outside, the French countryside breathed in the darkness. Inside, two people who'd been lost found each other. And somewhere, Arya thought, her mother was smiling. November arrived cold and gray, the lavender fields stripped bare, the cypresses standing stark against winter skies. Arya had signed with the smallest of the 3 fragrance houses, a boutique operation in Paris, run by a woman named Simone, who understood that Phoenix wasn't just a product, it was a statement. Production would begin in January, launch in spring. Everything was falling into place with a speed that should have felt triumphant, but instead left Arya vaguely unsettled. "You're worrying again," Lucien said one morning over coffee. They'd fallen into domestic routines without discussing them. Breakfast together, work in their separate spaces, dinner at the small table in the kitchen instead of that massive dining room. Normal things, small things, things that felt dangerously close to permanent. "I'm not worrying." "Your left eyebrow does this thing when you're worrying. Right there." He reached across and smoothed it with his thumb. "Talk to me." Arya set down her cup. Outside the kitchen window, Marguerite was cutting the last of the roses, preparing the garden for winter. "What happens after the launch? After Phoenix is out in the world and everyone knows my name again? Then you create the next thing, and the next. That's how this works." "But where? Here? Paris? New York? Where do you want to be?" She didn't have an answer. 3 months ago, she'd wanted revenge and recognition and her old life back. Now none of that seemed important. The life she'd built here, the work, the quiet, Lucien, felt more real than anything she'd had before. But it also felt fragile, like something that existed in a bubble that would pop the moment the outside world pressed too hard. "I don't know," she admitted. Lucien was quiet for a moment, his coffee cup held between both hands. "I have a meeting in Istanbul next week. Business I can't postpone. Come with me." "Why?" "Because I don't want to be away from you. Because Kadir has been asking about you. Because maybe some distance will help you figure out what you want." He paused. "Because I'm asking." The last reason was the one that mattered. Lucien didn't ask for things. He stated, directed, controlled. Asking meant vulnerability, meant admitting he needed something he couldn't demand. "Okay," Arya said, "I'll come." They left on a gray Tuesday morning. The same private jet, the same silent efficiency. But this time felt different, less like escape, more like continuation. Lucien worked on his laptop while Arya sketched ideas for future perfumes, things that didn't have names yet, just notes and impressions. Jasmine and gunpowder, honey and rust, the scent of snow. "What's that one?" Lucien asked, pointing to a sketch labeled with question marks. "I don't know yet. Something about contradiction. Sweet and dangerous. Beautiful and violent." "Sounds like you." She looked up sharply. He was almost smiling, that ghost of expression she'd learned meant he was teasing. "I'm not violent." "No, but you're dangerous. To me, at least." "How so?" "Because you make me want things I'd convinced myself I didn't deserve. Because you're teaching me that isolation isn't safety, it's just another kind of death. Because—" He stopped, something crossing his face. "Because you're the first person in 16 years I've let myself care about, and that terrifies me." Arya reached across the small table between their seats, taking his hand. "Good. Fear means you're alive. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be honest. His fingers tightened around hers. They stayed like that until the plane began its descent into Istanbul, the city spreading below them like scattered jewels. Kadir met them at the airport with his usual enthusiasm, pulling Lucienne into an embrace and kissing Arya on both cheeks like she was family. "Ah, you came back. I told my nephew you were taken, but he didn't believe me. Now I can prove it." "We're not," Arya started, then stopped. Were they? They lived together, worked together, slept in the same bed every night. But they'd never actually defined what this was. Partnership? Yes. Collaboration? Definitely. But relationship? That word felt too big and too small at the same time. "Don't bother denying it," Kadir said, waving a hand. "Old men can see these things. Come, come. I have something to show you both." He drove them not to the hotel, but to a building in Beyoğlu, an old Ottoman mansion converted into something between a museum and a laboratory. Inside, the air smelled like roses and time and money. "This," Kadir announced, "is where I want to expand, partner with you both. Create something that combines my roses with Arya's genius and Lucian's business sense, a fragrance house like no other." Arya walked through the space, her mind already racing. The bones were beautiful, high ceilings, original tile work, windows that let in perfect northern light. With the right equipment, the right team, this could be extraordinary. "What do you think?" Lucian asked quietly, coming to stand beside her. "I think it's ambitious, maybe crazy." "The best things usually are." She turned to look at him. "You'd want to do this? Build something here? It would mean spending half our time in Turkey." "Half our time together in Turkey," he corrected. "Yes, I'd want that." The words settled between them, casual but weighted with implication. Our time. Together. Like it was a given that wherever they went as a unit. Before Arya could respond, her phone rang. A Paris number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it, then saw Simone's name flash up, the fragrance house owner. "I need to take this," she told Lucienne, stepping away. "Arya, hello." Simone's voice was crisp, professional. "I wanted to give you advance notice. Phoenix is generating significant interest. We've had inquiries from Celeste Castellane's team about potential collaboration." Arya's blood went cold. "What?" "She saw the samples. She's impressed. She wants to meet with you about incorporating Phoenix into her spring line. It would be extraordinary exposure." "No." Silence on the line. "I'm sorry?" Simone said carefully. "I said no. No meeting, no collaboration, no contact. Celeste Castellane stole my previous work. I won't give her access to this." "Arya, I understand there's history, but from a business perspective. I don't care about the business perspective. Phoenix isn't for sale to her. That's non-negotiable." More silence. Then, "I'll inform her team. But Arya, you should know. Turning down this kind of opportunity, it could limit—" "I know what it could limit. The answer is still no." She hung up, her hands shaking, turned to find Lucian watching her, his expression unreadable. "Celeste wants Phoenix," she said. "I gathered. What did you tell them?" "No. Obviously." "Good." He moved closer. "But you're rattled." "I thought I was past this, past caring about her and Julian and all of it. But hearing her name," Arya pressed her palms to her eyes, "I wanted to reach through the phone and destroy her. That's normal. Healing isn't linear." "How would you know? You spent 16 years not healing at all." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. Lucian went very still, and Arya immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "No, you're right." His voice was flat. "I'm not exactly an expert on healthy emotional processing, but I'm learning. You're teaching me. So let me teach you something I've learned. Revenge feels good in the moment, but it's empty. Building something better, that's the real victory." Arya took a breath, forcing herself to calm down. "You're right. I know you're right. It still hurts." "Of course it hurts. They took something from you. That doesn't stop mattering just because you've moved on." He reached out, tucking her hair behind her ear in that gesture that had become familiar. "But you're not that person anymore. You're not the woman who had everything stolen and nowhere to go. You're Arya Vance, creator of Phoenix. You're the perfumer who transformed pain into art. They can't touch that. She leaned into his hand, feeling the warmth of it, the steadiness. When did you get so wise? I have an excellent teacher. They spent the rest of the day with Kadir, touring the building, discussing possibilities. By evening, Arya's head was spinning with ideas. The equipment they'd need, the staff, the launch timeline. It felt huge and impossible and exactly right. Dinner was at the same restaurant as before, cushions and endless dishes and Kadir's booming laughter. But halfway through, Arya noticed Lucien checking his phone repeatedly, his expression darkening each time. What's wrong? She asked quietly while Kadir was ordering more tea. Nothing, just... He set the phone down harder than necessary. My brother, apparently he's in Istanbul, wants to meet. Something in his tone made Arya's stomach drop. I didn't know you had a brother. I don't. Not anymore. We haven't spoken in 15 years. Then why, because he's persistent and cruel and very good at showing up when he's least wanted. Lucien's jaw was tight. I'm not meeting him. Whatever he wants, the answer is no. But the universe had other plans. They were walking back to the hotel, the Istanbul night warm despite the calendar claiming winter, when a man stepped out of the shadows ahead of them. He looked like Lucien, same height, same dark hair, but where Lucien was all sharp control, this man was chaos barely contained. Expensive suit rumpled, tie loosened, smile like broken glass. Lucien, how lovely! Ignoring my calls, so I had to track you down in person. Lucien went rigid. Mathieu, go away. Is that any way to greet your only brother? Mathieu's eyes slid to Arya, appraising and cold. And you must be the perfumer, the one he's been obsessing over. Arya Vance, I've heard so much about you. You've heard nothing, Lucien said, his voice deadly quiet. Leave, now. Can't. I have information you need, about your little project. Mathieu pulled out a cigarette, lit it. About what really happened in Grasse. Arya felt Lucien go completely still beside her, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. Whatever you think you know, Lucien started. I don't think. I know. I was there. Mathieu smiled through the smoke. Or did you forget? I was in Grasse that summer too, watching my little brother fall apart over some perfumer who saw through all his careful walls. Watching him play at being human with Isabel Vance while our father's empire burned. I saw everything, Lucien, including what you're too guilty to admit. Stop talking, Lucien said. The fire wasn't your fault. Not really. But you knew that already, didn't you? Deep down, under all that self-flagellation and isolation, you knew. Because it wasn't a heating element that started it. It was me. The words dropped like stones into water. Arya couldn't breathe. You're lying, Lucien said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Am I? Think back. That night, you and Isabel were so focused on your precious formula, you didn't notice me in the building. Didn't notice me sabotaging your equipment because I was tired of watching you betray our family for some bleeding heart perfumer and her theories about emotional healing. Mathieu flicked ash onto the pavement. I thought it would just ruin the experiment. Didn't expect the whole place to go up. Didn't expect Isabel to die. But accidents happen, don't they? Lucien moved so fast, Arya barely saw it. One moment Mathieu was standing there smoking, the next Lucien had him against the wall, forearm across his throat, face twisted with 16 years of buried rage. You killed her! Technically, the fire killed her. I just provided the spark. Mathieu didn't even struggle, just smiled that broken glass smile. But you can't prove it. Can't do anything about it except carry that guilt a little longer. Knowing that you spent 16 years punishing yourself for my crime. Lucien, let him go, Arya said, finding her voice. He's not worth it. Listen to your girlfriend, Mathieu wheezed. She's smart, smarter than you deserve. Lucien's grip tightened. For a moment, Arya genuinely thought he might kill his brother right there on the Istanbul street. Then something in him broke differently. He let go, stepping back, his breathing ragged. Why? The word came out raw. Why tell me this now? Because Father's dying. Because he wants to see you before the end. Because the inheritance needs sorting, and you've been hiding in France long enough. Mathieu straightened his jacket. And because I'm tired of you pretending to be the villain in this story. You want to play martyr? Fine. But at least be a martyr for something you actually did. He walked away, disappearing into the Istanbul night like he'd never been there at all. Lucien stood frozen, his hands clenched, his whole body vibrating with emotion he couldn't process. Lucien, Arya reached for him. Don't. He pulled away. I need to think. Then think out loud. Talk to me. I can't, not right now. He looked at her, and his eyes were hollowed out, everything she'd helped him rebuild crumbling in real time. I need to be alone. No, you need to not be alone. That's the whole problem. You shut down when things get hard, and I said I need space. The words came out harsh, loud enough that people on the street turned to look. I'm not ready for this, Arya. Any of this. I thought I was, but I'm not. I can't. I don't know how to process this and be with you and make decisions and... So what, you're running away? I'm protecting you. From me. From this mess. From whatever else Mathieu is planning, because he wouldn't have told me unless he wanted something. I don't need protecting, Arya said, her voice sharp. I need honesty. I need you to stay and work through this instead of reverting back to the ghost you were when I met you. Maybe that's who I actually am. Maybe the past few months were just... He stopped, running both hands through his hair. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. You know I'm here. You know I care about you. You know what we built together is real. Is it? His laugh was bitter. Or is it just another construction? Another fortress built on lies? My brother killed your mother, Arya? He killed her and let me believe it was my fault for 16 years, and I brought you to France based on that lie. Everything between us is built on that lie. No, everything between us is built on what we created together, on Phoenix, on learning to feel again, on a fantasy, on me pretending I could be normal, that I could want things, that I deserved... He stopped, his voice breaking. I don't deserve this, any of this. I never did. That's the guilt talking. That's 16 years of self-punishment talking. That's not the truth. How do you know what the truth is? You've known me 4 months, Arya. 4 months isn't enough to understand. It's enough to know you're scared. It's enough to know you're looking for an excuse to run because things got too real and you don't know how to handle real. The words landed hard. Lucien stared at her, something cracking behind his eyes, and Arya knew she'd hit the target. He was scared. Scared of feeling too much, wanting too much, risking too much. Mathieu's revelation had just given him the excuse he'd been unconsciously waiting for. I'm going back to the hotel, he said finally, his voice flat. Alone. Don't follow me. Lucien, I mean it, Arya. I need space. He stopped, looking at her like he was memorizing her face, like he was saying goodbye. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to atone for something I didn't do. He turned and walked away. Arya stood on the Istanbul street, her heart pounding, her mind racing, and felt the ground shift under her feet. Everything she'd thought was solid, their partnership, their relationship, their future, suddenly felt like smoke, like it had never been real at all. She went back to her hotel room, not his suite, sat on the bed and stared at the Bosphorus through the window, watching the city lights blur through tears she didn't want to shed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lucien. I'm sorry, I just need time. Time. The thing you said when you meant distance, when you meant running, when you meant this isn't working and I don't know how to say it. Arya didn't respond, just sat there feeling everything crack apart, all the hope and possibility and careful trust dissolving like perfume in air. She'd been so stupid, had actually believed that damaged people could heal each other, that love was enough to transform pain, that someone who'd spent 16 years hiding could learn to stay. She should have known better, should have protected herself, should have remembered that fairy tales didn't happen in real life, and men who lived like ghosts eventually disappeared. The next morning, Lucien was gone. Not just gone from the hotel, gone from Istanbul entirely. The concierge informed her that Monsieur Devereaux had checked out at 4 a.m., taken a car to the airport, left no message except that Ms. Vance's return flight was arranged whenever she was ready. Arya stood in the lobby with her suitcase and felt the last piece of hope die. He'd left. actually left, without even the decency to say goodbye to her face. Kadir found her an hour later, sitting in a cafe near the hotel, staring at coffee she couldn't drink. "He ran," Kadir said, sitting down across from her. No greeting, just statement. "How did you—" "Lucien called me at 5 this morning, told me to watch out for you, make sure you got home safe, apologize on his behalf." Kadir's expression was grim. "I told him he was a coward. He didn't disagree." "Did he tell you what happened about his brother?" "He told me enough," Kadir sighed. "Mathieu is poison, always has been. He shows up every few years to destroy whatever peace Lucien's managed to find. This time he succeeded. I could have helped him through it. We could have figured it out together, but he just—" Arya's voice cracked. "He just left. Because that's what Lucien does when things get too real. He runs, he hides. He convinces himself he's protecting people when really he's protecting himself." Kadir reached across the table, patting her hand. "I'm sorry, child. You deserved better. I don't understand. We were building something. We were happy. How does that just disappear overnight?" "It doesn't. He's still there, still feeling everything. He's just too scared to let himself have it." Kadir paused. "The question is, are you going to let him run, or are you going to fight for him?" Arya looked up sharply. "He made his choice." "No, he made a mistake. There's a difference." Kadir's eyes were kind but firm. "I've known Lucien for 20 years. I've seen him isolated, controlled, locked inside himself. These past few months, working with you, being with you, were the first time I've seen him actually live. You think he wants to go back to that prison? He's terrified, yes. But he also loves you. He's just too damaged to know what to do with it." "Love," Arya repeated, the word feeling foreign. "He never said—" "Of course he didn't. Lucien doesn't say things like that. He shows them through actions, through protection, through staying when every instinct tells him to run." Kadir leaned forward. "He ran this time because Mathieu hit exactly the right nerve, made him question everything. But that doesn't mean he wants to be gone. It just means he needs someone to remind him why he stayed in the first place. I can't chase someone who doesn't want to be caught." "Can't you?" "Because from where I'm sitting, that's exactly what he needs. Someone stubborn enough to break through his walls. Someone who won't let him hide just because hiding is easier." Kadir smiled. "You finished your mother's perfume. You taught him to feel again. You really going to give up now because he got scared?" Arya sat with that for a long moment, anger and hurt warring with something else, something that felt like understanding. Lucien wasn't running from her. He was running from himself, from the possibility of happiness, from 16 years of carefully constructed isolation crumbling. And maybe Kadir was right. Maybe he needed someone to tell him that running wasn't the answer. "Where would he go?" Arya asked finally. "Back to France. Back to that estate. Back to being alone because alone is safe." Kadir pulled out his phone. "I can get you there faster than commercial flight. But Arya, if you do this, if you go after him, you need to be sure. Because he'll fight you. He'll push you away. He'll try every trick he knows to make you leave. You have to be strong enough to stay anyway. And if I can't reach him, then at least you tried. At least you gave him the chance to choose differently." Kadir's expression softened. "Your mother would have gone after him. Isabel never gave up on people, even when they'd given up on themselves. Maybe that's the real legacy she left you. Not the gift of scent, but the gift of seeing people's potential even when they can't see it themselves." Arya thought about her mother, working with Lucien all those years ago, trying to help him heal. Thought about the journal entry that said control was just another kind of death. Thought about the perfume they'd created together, Phoenix, rising from ashes, becoming something new through destruction. Maybe this was just another fire, another moment of destruction before transformation. "Get me to France," Arya said. "Fast as you can." Kadir's smile was fierce. "Now you sound like an Vance." Kadir's private plane was smaller than Lucien's, faster, and it got Arya to Provence in under 4 hours. She spent the flight alternating between fury and determination, rehearsing what she'd say when she found him. By the time they landed, she'd abandoned all her careful speeches. She'd say whatever came out when she saw his face. The estate looked different in late November. bare and gray, the garden stripped to bones, the house somehow smaller without summer's abundance to hide behind. Arya paid the taxi driver and stood at the gates, her suitcase at her feet, and wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. The gates were locked. Of course they were. She pressed the intercom button, waited, nothing. Pressed it again, holding it down. "Go away," Lucian's voice through the speaker, rough and tired. "No." "Arya." "Let me in, or I'll climb the fence. Your choice." Silence. Then the gate swung open with a mechanical groan. Arya grabbed her suitcase and marched up the drive, her heart pounding, her hands shaking with adrenaline and something close to rage. The front door opened before she reached it. Lucien stood there, and Arya's breath caught despite her anger. He looked wrecked, unshaven, wearing the same clothes he'd left Istanbul in, eyes hollowed out like he hadn't slept, like he'd spent the past 36 hours systematically destroying himself from the inside. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Too bad. I am." "Arya, I meant what I said. I need space. I need to hide, to run, to convince yourself you don't deserve good things." She dropped her suitcase on the gravel. "Yeah, I got the message. I'm just not accepting it." "This isn't a negotiation." "You're right. It's not. Because you don't get to decide for both of us. You don't get to blow up everything we built because you're scared." "I'm not scared. I'm being realistic. My brother killed your mother. That's not something we can just... Your brother killed my mother. You didn't. You tried to save her. You've spent 16 years honoring her memory, keeping your promise, protecting me from shadows. That doesn't change because Mathieu is a psychopath." Lucian's jaw tightened. "You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I understand you spent so long punishing yourself that you forgot how to accept forgiveness. I understand that the moment things got real between us, you looked for an excuse to run. I understand that you'd rather be alone and miserable than risk being happy and potentially losing it." Arya stepped closer. "What I don't understand is why you think I'd let you. Because you should. Because I'm broken in ways that don't fix. Because..." His voice cracked. "Because everyone I care about ends up hurt. Your mother, you, everyone. And I won't do that again." So your solution is to hurt me now? Preemptively? That's not protection, Lucien. That's cowardice." The word landed like a slap. Lucian flinched, something raw crossing his face. "Maybe I am a coward. Maybe that's all I've ever been." "Bullshit. A coward wouldn't have spent 16 years watching over someone from the shadows. A coward wouldn't have brought me here to finish impossible work. A coward wouldn't have let himself feel again after locking everything down for so long." Arya closed the distance between them. "You're not a coward. You're terrified. There's a difference." "Is there?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, and I know because I'm terrified too. Terrified that what we built was real. Terrified that I care about you more than I've cared about anyone. Terrified that if you walk away now, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been." She reached up, cupping his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "But I'm here anyway, because some things are worth being scared for." Lucian's eyes closed. "You should hate me." "I kind of do right now. You left me in Istanbul. You ran without even saying goodbye. You made me feel like everything between us was a lie." Her voice shook. "That hurt more than anything Julian ever did, because this time I actually believed..." She stopped, swallowing hard. "I believed you saw me, really saw me, not as a tool or a project or a way to atone for guilt. Just me, Arya, the person. I do see you." His hands came up to cover hers. "I see everything. That's the problem. I see how extraordinary you are, how much potential you have, how bright your future could be. And I see myself, damaged, isolated, carrying enough baggage to sink a ship. I don't want to be the thing that holds you back." "Then don't be. Be the thing that helps me fly." Arya's voice softened. "We can do this, Lucian. We can build something real, but only if you stop running, only if you stay." "I don't know how." "Then learn. With me. We'll figure it out together." They stood there in the doorway, the November wind cold around them, and Arya felt something shift, not breaking, but bending. Lucien's forehead dropped to rest against hers, his breath shaky. "I'm so tired," he whispered. "Tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of being afraid of everything." "Then stop. Just stop. Let yourself rest." "Oh, what if I fail? What if I can't be what you need? What if you can? What if we're actually good together and you're throwing it away because you've convinced yourself you don't deserve happiness?" Arya pulled back to look at him. "My mother believed you could heal. She spent her last weeks working with you because she saw something worth saving. Are you really going to prove her wrong?" Something in Lucien broke at that. Not shattered, but opened. His arms went around her, pulling her close, and he buried his face in her hair and just held on. Arya wrapped her arms around him and held back, feeling him shake, feeling 16 years of walls finally crumbling for real this time. "I'm sorry," he said against her hair. "I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I keep being so terrible at this." "You're not terrible. You're learning. There's a difference." She pulled back enough to see his face. "But if you run again, I'm going to be really pissed. Fair warning." "Noted." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "How did you get here so fast?" "Kadir helped. Apparently he's had enough of you self-destructing." "He told you where I'd be?" "He told me you'd run home. That you'd lock yourself in this estate and pretend the past 4 months didn't happen." Arya paused. "He also told me not to let you get away with it. So I'm not. You're stuck with me." "Is that a threat or a promise?" "Both." This time when he kissed her, it felt different. Not desperate or careful or testing. Just present. Real. Like he'd finally stopped fighting and started accepting. They stumbled inside, leaving her suitcase on the drive, the door slamming behind them. Made it as far as the library before they couldn't wait anymore, their hands urgent, their bodies remembering what their minds had tried to forget. Afterward, they lay tangled on the leather couch, the room cold except for where their skin touched. Lucien traced patterns on her shoulder, his expression thoughtful. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. Arya's stomach dropped. "If it's more bad news..." "No, just truth." He took a breath. "When Mathieu showed up, when he told me what really happened, my first thought wasn't anger or relief or any of the things it should have been. It was panic. Because if I wasn't guilty, if I hadn't actually killed your mother, then I didn't have an excuse anymore. For the isolation, for the control, for keeping everyone at a distance. I'd built my entire life around that guilt, and suddenly it was gone. And that scared you more than carrying it." "Yes. Because guilt is easy. It's simple. It gives you a reason to suffer, to deny yourself, to stay locked away. But if I'm not guilty, if I'm just a man who made a mistake and then spent 16 years punishing himself for it, then I have to face that I wasted all that time, that I could have been living instead of hiding. That's harder to accept." Arya propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. "You didn't waste it. You kept your promise. You protected me. You built a life, even if it was a lonely one. That counts for something." "Does it?" "Yes. And now you get to decide what comes next. You can go back to hiding, or you can stay with me and build something new. Your choice." Lucien was quiet for a long moment, his hand stilling on her shoulder. "What if I choose wrong?" "Then we fix it. That's what people do. They make mistakes and fix them and keep moving forward. You make it sound simple." "It is simple. It's just not easy." Arya leaned down, kissing him softly. "But I think we can do hard things. We already have." They stayed there until the winter light faded, talking through everything. Mathieu's revelation, Lucien's panic, Arya's hurt, what came next. It wasn't neat or resolved. They still had work to do, but at least they were doing it together. The next morning, Arya found Marguerite in the kitchen, preparing coffee with her usual silent efficiency. The older woman looked up when Arya entered, her expression knowing. "You brought him back." "I did my best." "Your best is considerable." Marguerite poured 2 cups. "Your mother would be proud. She never gave up on people either." Arya took the offered coffee, warming her hands on the cup. "Did you know? About Mathieu?" "I suspected. There were inconsistencies in Lucien's account, things that didn't add up if he'd been as careless as he claimed, but I had no proof. And Lucien was so committed to his guilt, I thought perhaps I'd misremembered. She paused. Mathieu is poison. He always has been. Their father made them compete for everything: love, approval, inheritance. It broke them both, but in different ways. Lucien turned inward. Mathieu turned cruel. Is he coming back? Mathieu? Probably. He never stays away long. He likes to remind Lucien that he can still destroy him. Marguerite's expression hardened. But this time will be different. This time, Lucien has you. That makes him stronger, even if he doesn't realize it yet. Arya hoped that was true. She carried the second cup of coffee upstairs, finding Lucien in his bedroom, their bedroom now, she supposed, staring out at the bare gardens. He turned when she entered, accepting the coffee with a small smile that felt like progress. I have a meeting with my lawyers this afternoon, he said, about my father's estate. Mathieu wasn't lying. He's dying. Cancer. He wants to see me before the end. Are you going to go? I don't know. Part of me thinks I should. He's my father, even if we haven't spoken in years. But another part... He stopped, his jaw tight. He made Mathieu into what he is, made both of us compete for scraps of approval that never came. I don't know if I can forgive that. Then don't go. You don't owe him anything. Don't I? He's dying alone, Arya. Whatever he did, that's a terrible way to end. So is making your children destroy each other for your entertainment. Arya set down her coffee, moving to stand beside him. But this isn't about what he deserves. It's about what you need. If seeing him will give you closure, go. If it'll just reopen wounds, stay here. Don't make this decision based on obligation. Lucien was quiet for a long moment. Come with me. What? To the meeting. To all of it. I can't face this alone. I've been alone too long already. He turned to look at her. If we're doing this, if we're actually building something together, then I need you there. As my partner. He stopped, struggling with words he'd probably never said before. As the person I love. Even if I'm terrible at showing it. Arya's breath caught. You love me? Terrifyingly much. I thought that was obvious. You've never said it. I'm saying it now. I love you, Arya Vance. I've probably loved you since you showed up in France looking like a avenging angel. He took a breath. I'm just getting used to admitting it. Arya kissed him before he could say anything else, pouring everything she felt into it. Relief and joy and that terrifying certainty that this was real, this mattered, this was worth fighting for. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. I love you too, even when you're being impossible, even when you run, even when you're convinced you don't deserve good things. She pulled back to meet his eyes. Especially then, actually. That's masochistic. Probably, but I never claimed to be rational. They went to the lawyers' meeting together, Arya sitting beside Lucien as stern-faced men in expensive suits discussed inheritances and trusts and legal complications she barely understood. What she did understand was that Lucien's father had been extraordinarily wealthy, that the money came with strings and expectations, and that Mathieu was contesting everything. He claims you're mentally unfit to inherit, one lawyer explained. Says you've been isolated for years, that you're not capable of managing the estate responsibly. That's bullshit, Arya said before Lucien could respond. The lawyers looked startled. Lucien almost smiled. My client is perfectly capable, the head lawyer continued smoothly. We have documentation of his business dealings, his property management, his... I don't want it, Lucien interrupted. Silence around the table. I'm sorry, the lawyer said carefully. The inheritance, the estate, all of it. Give it to charity. Set up a foundation. I don't care. Lucien leaned back in his chair. My father spent his life pitting me and Mathieu against each other. I won't spend mine fighting over his money. Let Mathieu have it if he wants it that badly. Monsieur Devereux, this is a considerable fortune. I have my own fortune, one I built without his help. That's enough. Lucien stood. Draw up whatever papers you need. I'm disclaiming my inheritance. Mathieu wins. Tell him congratulations. He walked out. Arya followed, catching up to him in the building's marble lobby. That was dramatic, she said. That was necessary. I'm done letting my father control my life from beyond the grave. I'm done competing with Mathieu for approval that never mattered. He took her hand. I have everything I need already. Do you? I have you. I have the estate. I have work I care about. What else is there? A partnership in Istanbul. A perfume to launch. A future to build. Exactly. Lucien kissed her hand. Let's go home. They drove back to Provence as winter settled over the countryside. That evening, Arya returned to the orangery for the first time since Istanbul. The space felt different, not abandoned, but waiting. She walked through it slowly, touching equipment, remembering the months she'd spent here creating something impossible. The original bottles of Phoenix sat on a shelf, carefully stored. Arya opened one, smelling it. The perfume had developed in storage, deepened, become even more itself. Grief transforming into wisdom, pain opening into capacity. It smelled complete now in a way it hadn't before. It's ready? Lucien said from the doorway. Arya turned. What is? All of it, the perfume, the launch, you. He moved into the space. I talked to Simone this afternoon. The production is ahead of schedule. They want to launch in January instead of spring. New year, new beginning, all that. That's fast. Too fast? No, just... Arya set down the bottle. It means going public, facing Julian and Celeste, facing everyone who watched me disappear. Are you ready for that? She thought about it. About the woman she'd been 8 months ago, broken, erased, with nothing left to lose. About who she was now, stronger, clearer, with everything to fight for. Yeah, she said. I'm ready. The launch was in Paris in mid-January, a small event at Simone's boutique in the Marais. Not Fashion Week level, but intimate, exclusive, the kind of thing that got whispered about in industry circles. Arya wore black, simple, elegant, nothing that distracted from the perfume itself. Lucien stood beside her, solid and present, his hand occasionally finding hers when the crowd got too thick. Julian and Celeste didn't come. Arya hadn't expected them to, but plenty of others did. Perfumers she'd trained with in Grasse, journalists who'd covered her downfall at Fashion Week, influencers who smelled a comeback story and wanted to be part of it. Mika flew in from New York, pulling Arya into a fierce hug and whispering that she'd known Arya would survive this. The reviews came fast. Phoenix was called revolutionary, haunting, impossible to forget. Ishin. Critics praised its complexity, its emotional depth, the way it evolved on skin into something personal and transformative. By the end of the night, Simone's entire stock was sold. 3 major fragrance houses had made acquisition offers. An American department store wanted exclusive rights for the U.S. market. You did it, Lucien said as they walked back to their hotel through Paris's winter streets. You got everything back. We did it, Arya corrected. This was always both of us. They flew back to France the next morning, exhausted and exhilarated. The estate felt like sanctuary after Paris's chaos. Quiet and still, and completely theirs. They fell into bed and slept for 12 hours straight, then woke tangled together and immediately wanted more. I have a question, Lucien said afterward, both of them still catching their breath. If it's about expanding to Istanbul, the answer is yes. It's not about Istanbul. He propped himself up on one elbow. It's about this, us, what we're calling it. Arya's heart skipped. What do you want to call it? Something permanent, something real. He reached out, tucking her hair behind her ear. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other 8 months, but I also know I don't want to waste any more time pretending I don't need you. So, he took a breath. Move in with me. Not as a guest or a colleague, as my partner. In everything. I already live here. Officially, permanently. Make this your home, not just a place you're staying. Arya studied his face, this man who'd been a stranger and became everything. Are you sure? No running this time? No running. I'm done with that. I want this. I want you. I want mornings in the orangery and dinners in the kitchen and winters in Istanbul and whatever else we build together. His voice dropped. I want all of it, Arya, if you'll have me. She kissed him instead of answering, letting her body say what words couldn't quite capture. When they finally broke apart, both smiling, she nodded. Yes, to all of it. Partnership, Istanbul, making this home, everything. Everything, Lucian repeated like he was testing the word. I like the sound of that. They spent February planning the Istanbul expansion. Kadir sent updates almost daily. Renovations on the building, equipment orders, potential staff. The project was ambitious, maybe crazy, but it felt right. A fragrance house built on three principles: Turkish roses, cutting-edge technique, and the belief that scent could transform emotion. In March, they flew to Istanbul for the grand opening. The space was extraordinary. Kadir had spared no expense. Modern equipment and Ottoman architecture, tradition meeting innovation, East and West finding common ground. The launch party was bigger than Paris, louder, more alive. Kadir gave a speech in Turkish and English about collaboration and friendship and refusing to let the past dictate the future. Arya watched Lucien listening, saw him smiling without reservation, and felt something warm settle in her chest. This was what transformation looked like. Not erasing the pain, but building something beautiful alongside it. They stayed in Istanbul for 2 weeks, working with the new team, establishing systems, making sure everything ran smoothly. Arya taught technique while Lucien handled business. They were good together, complementary strengths, different approaches, unified vision, the kind of partnership that felt effortless even when the work was hard. On their last night before returning to France, they walked along the Bosphorus as the sun set, turning the water gold and pink. Lucien stopped at a quiet spot, pulling Arya close. I have something for you, he said. If it's more equipment, the orangery is full. It's not equipment. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small box. It's this. Arya's breath stopped. The box was vintage, dark velvet, the kind that held something important. Lucien opened it, revealing a ring, simple, elegant, a single stone that caught the fading light. I'm not good at speeches, he started. I'm not good at most things involving emotion and vulnerability and admitting I need things. But I'm learning. You're teaching me. And one thing I've learned is that I don't want to do any of this without you. He took a breath. Marry me, Arya. Not because it's expected or practical or makes business sense. Marry me because I love you, because you saw through all my walls and stayed anyway, because you taught me that transformation is possible, even when you've given up on yourself. Arya stared at the ring, at Lucien's face, at the Istanbul sunset painting everything gold. She thought about the past year, betrayal and rescue, France and fire, perfume that transformed pain. Thought about the woman she'd been and the woman she'd become. Thought about Lucien, learning to feel again, learning to stay, learning to love despite every instinct telling him to run. Yes, she said, her voice steady. Yes to everything. He slipped the ring on her finger, a perfect fit like he'd somehow known, and kissed her while Istanbul breathed around them, ancient and new, tradition and transformation existing side by side. They married in June at the estate, a small ceremony in the gardens with lavender blooming purple and the sky impossibly blue. Marguerite cried. Kadir gave a speech that was equal parts blessing and threat to treat Arya well. Mika was maid of honor, wiping tears while trying to maintain her tough New York exterior. Simone came from Paris with a bottle of wine older than Arya. Mathieu didn't attend. He'd taken the inheritance and disappeared, probably already burning through their father's fortune. Lucien didn't seem to care. He'd made his peace with his brother's poison, had decided that some relationships weren't worth salvaging. That was okay too. Not everything transformed, some things just ended. The reception lasted until dawn, music and laughter, and the particular kind of joy that comes from survival. Arya danced with Lucien under string lights, both of them exhausted and happy and completely present. This was real. This was theirs. This was the future they'd built from ashes and impossible perfume, and the courage to stay when running would have been easier. What are you thinking? Lucien asked, his arms around her waist, moving slowly to music only they could hear. That my mother would have loved this. Loved you. Loved knowing her work didn't die with her. She'd be proud of you, of what you created, of who you became. I had help. We helped each other. Lucien kissed her forehead. That's the whole point. They honeymooned in Grasse, coming full circle to where everything started. Arya visited her mother's grave for the first time since childhood, laying phoenix roses on the headstone and crying until she had nothing left. Lucien stood beside her the entire time, silent and solid, letting her feel everything without trying to fix it. She knew, Arya said finally, wiping her eyes, about you, about what you'd become to me. I think that's why she made you promise to watch over me. She saw something. She saw potential where I saw failure. That was her gift. No. Her gift was seeing people clearly, and she saw you, really saw you, and thought you were worth saving. Arya turned to look at him. She was right. They returned to Provence in July, to the estate that had become home, to work that felt like purpose, to a life they'd built together from nothing. The orangery was Arya's again, but different now. Not a prison of impossible projects, but a laboratory of possibility. She created new perfumes with Lucien's input, teaching him technique while he taught her business strategy. They were building an empire, slowly and carefully, brick by brick. In August, they received word that Julien and Celeste's fragrance line had collapsed. Reverie had been pulled from stores after someone, Arya suspected Kadir, leaked evidence that the formula was stolen. The scandal destroyed both their reputations. Julien's career was over. Celeste's family business took a massive hit. "How do you feel?" Lucien asked when Arya read the news. She thought about it carefully. A year ago, she would have felt triumphant, vindicated, like justice had finally been served. But now, "I feel nothing," she said honestly. "It's over. They're over. And I'm here doing work I love with someone I love. That's revenge enough. Look at you, being mature and evolved. Don't get used to it. I'm still petty about plenty of things. Good. I'd hate for you to lose your edge." September brought the announcement that Phoenix had won the prestigious Prix François Coty, the highest honor in perfumery. Arya accepted the award in Paris, giving a speech about transformation and honoring the past while building the future. She thanked Lucien, thanked her mother, thanked everyone who'd believed in her when she'd stopped believing in herself. The industry noticed. Offers poured in, collaborations, teaching positions, speaking engagements. Arya accepted some and declined others, building a career on her own terms instead of chasing every opportunity. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. Not everything that glittered was worth touching. By October, the Istanbul operation was thriving. They'd hired a full team, launched 3 new perfumes, established relationships with suppliers across Turkey and Eastern Europe. Kadir was in his element, managing operations while Arya and Lucien split time between France and Turkey, creating and strategizing and building something that felt bigger than both of them. "We should start a foundation," Arya said one evening at the estate. They were in the library, Lucien reading while Arya sketched ideas for a new scent. "Something that funds perfumery training for people who can't afford it. Like my mother did for me, working extra shifts so I could go to Grasse." Lucien looked up from his book. "That's a good idea." "Yeah? Yeah, let's do it. The Isabel Vance Foundation for Olfactory Arts has a nice ring to it." They launched it in November, on the anniversary of her mother's death. Not a sad day anymore, but a celebration of legacy and continuation. They funded scholarships, provided equipment to schools, created opportunities for talent that might otherwise never be discovered. It felt right, like coming home. In December, Arya discovered she was pregnant. She stared at the test in the bathroom of their Parisian hotel, her hands shaking, her mind racing. They hadn't planned this, hadn't even discussed it beyond vague someday conversations. But here it was, a reality, a choice, a future taking shape without permission. She found Lucien in the hotel's restaurant, finishing a business lunch. He took one look at her face and immediately ended the meeting, following her upstairs without question. "What's wrong?" he asked the moment they were alone. Arya handed him the test, watched his face as understanding dawned, shock first, then something else. Something that looked like wonder. "Are you—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "I'm pregnant. About 6 weeks, I think." Lucien sat down hard on the edge of the bed, still staring at the test. "A baby." "Yeah." "Our baby." "Yeah." He looked up at her, and Arya saw tears in his eyes, actual tears, something she'd only seen once before, in the orangery when he'd first smelled Phoenix. I never thought I'd have this. A family. Something real. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's. He stood crossing to her, his hands framing her face. It's terrifying and imperfect, and I don't know if I'll be any good at it, but I want to try. If you want to try. I want to try, Arya said, and realized she meant it. I'm scared too, but I think we can do this. We've done harder things. Have we, though? We transformed pain into perfume. We rebuilt broken people. We created something from nothing. She covered his hands with hers. A baby is just the next impossible thing. Lucien laughed, the sound wet and genuine. When did you get so optimistic? When I married a man who spent 16 years convinced he didn't deserve happiness and then chose it anyway. Arya kissed him softly. You taught me that transformation is possible, even when it's terrifying. They told no one for the first trimester, keeping the secret close and precious. Arya continued working, creating a new line of perfumes while her body changed in small ways. Exhaustion, sensitivity to smells that had never bothered her before, a constant awareness of something growing inside her. Lucien was attentive without being smothering, protective without being controlling. He was learning this new role the same way he'd learned everything else, carefully, deliberately, with complete commitment. In March, they told their small circle. Marguerite cried again, already planning nursery colors. Kadir sent a package containing every Turkish baby blessing he could find, along with a note that said Lucien was required to raise the child bilingual. Mika flew to France immediately, bringing impractical baby clothes and unsolicited advice. Simone sent champagne they couldn't drink and a promise to hold Arya's position until she was ready to return. The baby arrived in July, 2 weeks early but healthy. A girl with dark hair and Arya's nose and lungs that announced her presence to the entire hospital. They named her Isabel, after the woman who'd started everything, who'd seen potential in broken people and believed transformation was always possible. Arya held her daughter in the quiet hours after birth, exhausted and overwhelmed and completely in love, and thought about everything that had led here. Julian's betrayal had felt like the end of the world, but it had been a beginning, the fire that burned away everything false and left only what was real. The pain that transformed into phoenix, the loss that became gain. What are you thinking? Lucien asked from beside the bed, his eyes on their daughter. That I'm grateful for all of it, even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, because they led here. To sleep deprivation and diapers, to family, to love, to something real. Arya looked up at him. To you. Lucien leaned down, kissing her softly, carefully, like she was something precious. To us, he corrected. To everything we built together. Baby Isabel made a sound, not quite crying, just announcing herself. Lucien picked her up with practiced confidence, cradling her close, and Arya watched him become this new version of himself. Not the ghost, not the guilty man, just Lucien. Father, husband, partner, person. Transformed through courage and connection and the willingness to feel everything instead of nothing. They brought Isabel home to the estate in August, to the house that had been Lucien's prison and became their sanctuary. Marguerite fussed over the baby with fierce devotion. The orangery sat quiet, waiting for Arya to return when she was ready. The gardens bloomed with late summer abundance, roses and lavender and possibility. Life settled into new rhythms. Sleepless nights and stolen moments and the particular chaos of new parenthood. Arya created when she could, learning to work in shorter bursts, finding inspiration in exhaustion and wonder. Lucien managed business from home, conducting meetings while holding a sleeping infant, proving that empires could be built between feedings. By autumn, they'd found their balance. Arya returned to the orangery part-time, creating a new line she called Memoria. Perfumes that captured specific emotional memories. The scent of first love. The smell of home. The particular fragrance of new beginnings. It was personal work, vulnerable work, the kind she couldn't have created before learning that strength came from openness, not control. In November, on the anniversary of the day Lucien had appeared in her Brooklyn studio, they had dinner alone, a rare occurrence with an infant. Marguerite took Isabel for the evening, and Arya and Lucien sat in the small dining room with wine and food they barely touched, just talking. A year ago, Arya said, I couldn't have imagined this. Any of this. Neither could I. I was still convinced I'd spend the rest of my life alone. And now? Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. With anyone else. Doing anything else. Lucienne reached across the table, taking her hand. You saved my life, Arya. You know that, right? We saved each other. That was always the point. Was it? Phoenix transforms pain into something beautiful, but it doesn't work alone. You need the pain, and you need someone willing to see it, hold it, help you alchemize it into something else. Arya squeezed his hand. We did that for each other. That's the real formula, not the perfume. Us. Lucian smiled, fully, openly, without reservation. Us, he agreed, the best collaboration I've ever had. They moved to the library after dinner, sitting by the fire while winter pressed against the windows. Arya thought about her mother, working in a grass laboratory 16 years ago, trying to help a broken man learn to feel again. Isabel hadn't finished that work, but she'd started it, planted seeds that took years to grow. Seeds that became Phoenix, became love, became this family, sitting in firelight while their daughter slept upstairs. Thank you, Arya said quietly. For what? For keeping your promise. For protecting me all those years, even when I didn't know I needed it. For bringing me to France. For teaching me that transformation is possible. She leaned against his shoulder. For staying, even when staying was terrifying. Thank you, Lucienne replied, for teaching me how. For not giving up when I ran. For believing I was worth saving, even when I didn't believe it myself. His arm came around her. For choosing me. Every day. Even when I make it difficult. Especially then. They sat there as the fire burned low, two people who'd been broken and became whole, not despite the pain but because of it, not by avoiding the fire, but by walking through it and discovering what lived on the other side. Phoenix had been Arya's masterpiece, the perfume that transformed pain into beauty, grief into wisdom, loss into capacity. But this was better. This life they'd built, this family they'd created, this love that existed because they'd both been brave enough to feel everything instead of nothing. The estate breathed around them, no longer a tomb but a home. The orangery waited, full of possibility. Istanbul thrived, expanding every month. The foundation funded dozens of students. Memoria was launching in spring, and upstairs, Isabel slept in a nursery painted with stars, dreaming whatever babies dream, safe and loved, and completely unaware of the impossible journey that had led to her existence. Arya closed her eyes, breathing in the moment, wood smoke and roses and Lucienne's particular scent that she could finally read completely. Hope and love and presence. No more walls, no more hiding. Just a man who'd learned to be human again, sitting with the woman who'd taught him how. This was the real ending. Not revenge or triumph or validation from the industry that had watched her fall. Just this. Just peace and love and the quiet certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Phoenix had risen from the ashes, but more importantly, so had they, together.